Hello, I'm Dr Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to, well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. It is an absolute delight to welcome you to my 100th episode, 100 consecutive weeks of a weekly podcast that I am so incredibly proud of, and it has connected me with people all over the world in ways that I could never have predicted. It's been a learning journey for me, not only personally and professionally and as a podcaster, but of course, there is so much that I've learned from meeting my wonderful guests along the way, and I've got a very special episode for all of us today, but I just wanted to share with you that as I've sat down to start recording, I noticed on my flip chart of quotes that I have on my desk, the one that just happens to be facing me right now reads like this. It's by Martin Luther King Jr. and it says, "You don't have to see the whole staircase to take the first step." It's the perfect quote to mark this occasion, given that I'm definitely not at the top of the staircase because there are a lot more episodes coming your way. This is something that I so love doing and am really dedicated to bringing you every single week. But certainly when I was on the first step, I was so anxious, incredibly anxious. And for those of you who have been with me on this journey from the beginning, you will know, you could probably hear it in my voice, you could probably hear it in perhaps a lack of confidence and just the tentative steps that I was taking as I was finding my way and bringing my anxiety with me. When I started, it was very much me feeling anxious, knowing what was important to me, recognizing that in terms of my values, my love of learning and my need to share what I know to help improve other people's lives was really what was driving me when I began this in the pandemic. And I was supported by some beautiful people who have just been cheerleaders from the very beginning. And so I took that first step, and yeah, it's quite exciting to be here 100 weeks later, celebrating 100 episodes and also sharing a very special episode. So what I've done to mark this episode is to ask some of my brilliant guests to share what they would love for you to know about anxiety. I've been collecting answers from guests for some time now, and today I'm going to be sharing those with you along with my own thoughts and ideas, of course, around this topic that is very, very dear to my heart. The very first one that I want to share with you is from the brilliant Carly Taylor. Now, I invited Carly to join me for episode 1. And the reason that I did this is because Carly and I, whenever we get together as friends, there is just never enough time for us to talk. And we talk about all sorts of things, and we quickly get well below the surface and talk about things that are really important, about the work that we love, about family. And Carly is undertaking her Masters of Counselling at the moment. We're both very passionate about acceptance and commitment therapy, and we are both frequently putting ourselves out of our comfort zones. So it was just an absolute delight to invite Carly to join me for episode 1. And it really helped me to feel more comfortable, and it was really a lovely way to dip my toe in the water for my very first podcast episode. When I did my training in podcasting, I undertook a course by Seth Godin, and one of the key things he said that really helped to move me forward was make something meaningful for some. So that's how I started. I started by thinking that whatever I recorded, no matter where my confidence was or where my anxiety was, that my dedication was to make something meaningful that would be impactful to even just some of the people that are listening. And it's incredible to see how the audience has grown over time and through the thank you messages that I receive via DMs on Instagram, through emails, and also through the beautiful testimonials and reviews that have been shared online. I know that this podcast is making a difference for a lot of people, and that just absolutely fills my cup, and that's what makes me happy. So without any further ado, I would like to share Carly Taylor's message for me and for all of us here on the podcast after asking her the question, what would she really like for people to know about anxiety?
Congratulations, Dr. Jodi, on your 100th episode. What an amazing job you have done to help so many people who are struggling with anxiety. So proud of you. I want people to know that, I'm actually feeling a bit of anxiety recording this. I want to do a good job for Jodi. So my heart is racing and I've got these unhelpful thoughts running through my head around whether I'm going to do a good enough job or not. But through this discomfort, the motivation to record this far outweighs the motivation to say, no, sorry, Jodi, can't do it because my mind is telling me that I suck. So anxiety can really stop us in our tracks and stop us from doing what's important. If you can really get clear and connect to what's important to you, your values, your aspirations, you can use those as your guiding compass, not your anxiety. You may not be able to control your anxiety, but you can control how you respond to it. If you're going down that spiral, breath work, changing your environment, being out in nature can calm the nervous system enough for you to take action. Sometimes your anxiety will come along with you, but don't fuel it with your attention.
Carly, thank you so much for recording that for us, despite your anxiety. And I really appreciate, especially because you felt anxious, that you were motivated by your care for me and your want to support me in this 100th episode, as well as your love for your work and your dedication to really helping people understand anxiety and their mental health and their well-being to live a really rich life. So I'm especially grateful to you for opening the podcast with me on episode 1 and being here to help celebrate episode 100. And I really love that what you've highlighted there is that anxiety shows up around what we care about, and that we're not getting rid of anxiety. When we care about something, when something's important, it is going to show up for us. But when we can recognize that that's happening, we can, as you suggested, change our environment, use our breath, ground ourselves, avoid fueling the anxiety with our attention, and instead moving our attention towards what's important and using our values as our compass to guide us. Thanks so much, Carly. I'm so grateful for you and the wonderful work that you do. In the time that I've been recording podcast episodes, which is coming up to 2 years, I've worked hard to ensure there are a variety of episodes depending on your needs as a listener, whether or not you're listening because you are caring for someone or working for someone who lives with or struggles with anxiety, whether or not you're interested to learn about anxiety in general, whether or not you're a teacher or a parent, or perhaps you work as a health professional or a psychologist. I have all sorts of beautiful listeners. And so one episode that I recorded to really support parents, and a lot of teachers found this one particularly helpful as well, was called Setting Anxious Kids Up for Long-Term Success. This was episode 93. And I interviewed Leslie Cohen-Rubury. And I remember when I said, how do I pronounce your name? She said, it's Rubury, just like blueberry. So I'll always get that right. Leslie is a clinical social worker and also a podcast host. And she said something that really stuck with me. And I wonder if perhaps it might stick with you too. Here's what Leslie had to say when I asked her to answer the question, what would you just love for people to know about anxiety?
Okay. One thing that I would love for listeners to know about anxiety would be to remember that anxiety is a part of you, not all of you. And that to me is so important because when anxiety shows up, I know that it feels like every cell in your body is consumed by the anxiety. And if you can say to yourself in that moment, anxiety is a part of me, not all of me, and repeat it a few times, because your anxiety is not going to want to believe you, you're going to get a little traction and it shrinks in size, because we're not getting rid of it. We're going to that party with anxiety. We're going to do that podcast with anxiety. We got to take it along with us. But if we can say that line, anxiety is a part of me, not all of me, it really acknowledges both the presence that anxiety is there and how we can contain it a little bit when it feels all-consuming.
Anxiety is a part of you. It's not all of you. I love that Leslie was able to share that real pearl of wisdom with us. And we're so aligned the way that we think about anxiety and the way that we support people with their anxiety. And it's really important to remember that most anxiety is not a disorder. Most anxiety is completely normal. It's there to protect us. And sometimes our brain can detect a threat when it's really a challenge, an opportunity, or something we care about. In fact, most of us experience that. There are only a handful of people I've ever come across that really don't seem to feel too anxious when big things are happening, but maybe they are, but just aren't able to really tune into exactly what they're feeling and being able to notice and name what they're experiencing. It's so normal. It's very much a part of being human. And if it is a big part of your life, it is simply part of you, not all of you. And I thank Leslie. Thank you very much for sharing. And congratulations on your own podcast as well. I applaud you for starting your own podcast, which is a fly on the wall podcast. So you can listen in to Leslie as she works with families and parents as they talk about the challenges in their own homes with their own children. So Leslie, thank you very much for sharing that. When I interviewed our next guest, she explained so beautifully in episode 97 that anxiety and hope go hand in hand between where we are now and where we want to be. And it was just such a wonderful conversation. Tracy Dennis-Tiwary is a researcher. She's an entrepreneur. She's also a professor of psychology and neuroscience and a director of the Emotion Regulation Lab at the City University of New York. And so really experienced, incredible expert in this field. And we spoke about, among many other things, Tracy's book, Future Tense, and the idea of being able to listen to anxiety, to be able to leverage it, and to be able to let go. Tracy talks a lot about emotional fitness and shared some practical strategies that we can all use as well. I so enjoyed my conversation with Tracy and invited her to share her answer to my question, what would you just love people to know about anxiety? Here's what she said.
What I'd really like people to know about anxiety is that it is an emotion that isn't just negative. It feels bad, so we think about it as being negative and maybe even dangerous, which it is not. It's a healthy emotion. But the trick about anxiety is that it's focusing us on the negative, but it's also helping us see that our future holds positive possibilities still. That's why it activates us, and that's why it focuses us. So when we make anxiety an enemy, it will block us every time because we're not tuning in to what positive aspects of our life it shows us. It's when we make it an ally that we learn to negotiate with and live with and manage and deal with, but an ally nonetheless, that we can actually use it to make our lives better, that we will use it instead of be used by it.
Thank you so much, Tracy, for sharing that with us. I love how you talk about anxiety being our ally and how we can tend to focus on the negatives, but there are so many possibilities. And as you said, that's why it activates us and focuses us. And so I really love your perspective and the way that you write and share and talk and teach about anxiety in this way. And I love that final statement too. We can use it instead of being used by it. So Tracy, thank you very much. The next guest I'm going to reintroduce you to, when we were both on the conference team for the Positive Schools Conference here in Australia. And it was such a joy to be able to travel to Melbourne, which is my home city, to Sydney, Brisbane, and to Perth with Dr. Helena Popovic and the many other wonderful speakers and organisers of this incredible conference. And Helena and I, when we were in Perth, which is on the other side of the country, so for people who are listening from somewhere else in the world outside of Australia, I'm on the east coast of Australia, more or less, in Melbourne, and Perth is on the exact opposite side of the country. So I think it's about a 4.5 hour flight. And we travelled over, and Helena and I found ourselves with some extra time outside of the conference. And so we took off for a night tour of an old prison, which was so interesting. And we also had a beautiful meal together as well. Dr. Helena Popovic joined me for episode 88, which was called Binge Eating, Perception, Processed Food and Anxiety. And she shared a really powerful story about when she was a trainee doctor and she was binge eating, and she recalled a particular day where she had rehearsed exactly what she wanted to say to a surgeon who had been causing her such great stress and anxiety that she would go home after being in the company of this particular person and binge. And what she explained was that on one particular day, she let him know that if he continued to speak to her in that way, he would not get the best out of her. And that changed his behaviour, and it was a huge turning point for Helena with her health, with her eating disorder. And she's an incredible woman and shared in that particular episode about a range of different topics, including how our perceptions change our physiology and our reality. She also talked about food, of course, and how important nutrition is when it comes to our health and our psychological health as much as our physical health. And one thing that springs to mind is she talks about give yourself a clap, not a slap. It's about speaking kindly to yourself and rewarding yourself by recognising each day the things that you've done well. So an absolute dynamo and amazing to speak to. And I think while I'm recording this, she's actually walking the Kokoda Trail. So for people who heard that episode, that will not surprise you. She's doing that as a fundraiser. So Helena had this to say when I asked her to record a little something for this 100th episode.
Hello, Jodi. Congratulations on your 100th podcast episode. What a brilliant achievement. Not only because you had to overcome considerable anxiety to do it, and not only because of your high quality, informative, engaging and inspiring content, but because less than 1 in 5 podcasts that have been launched this year will make it to the next. So in other words, 80% of podcasts fail within the first few months. So double kudos to you. And I actually suspect that feeling anxious has probably contributed to your success because it impelled you to be meticulously well prepared and to seek out incredible guests. So thank you for the wonderful work you continue to do and for the support you've provided for so many listeners. Now, in answer to your question, what would I most like people to understand about anxiety? I think firstly that anxiety is a natural survival mechanism. And by survival, I mean anxiety happens to protect us from physical, psychological, or emotional harm. But, and it's a big but, if someone's anxiety becomes so high that it limits their enjoyment of life, it indicates they become disconnected from a part of themselves, usually due to some kind of trauma or abuse or neglect or pain. And that disconnection from a part of ourselves is a core driver of anxiety in all its different forms. And when I say disconnection, what I mean is we're disconnected from either our values, our physical body, our feelings, our needs, our truth, or our strength. Because when we feel connected with the deepest core of who we are, that's when we feel at peace and we know that we have the inner strength to deal with whatever life throws our way. So the way to reconnect with ourselves is to engage in actually any number of healing practices. I think the most powerful of which is to learn how to feel our feelings. That means simply sitting with the anxiety and just sitting with it long enough, bearing the discomfort and allowing it to pass through us, because we are not our anxiety. I actually encourage people to let go of the term my anxiety, let go of the phrase I am anxious, because that makes an anxiety part of your identity. Instead, I recommend the terminology I feel anxious. I am not my anxiety. It's simply a sensation that can pass through me if I allow it to do so, and it will leave me feeling stronger than ever before. That for me was the most powerful thing. But steps along the way could be other practices that help us reconnect to ourselves, and that would be things like mindfulness, meditation, even engaging in physical exercise, any form of movement that allows us to feel connected with our body. Another really powerful way to connect with ourselves is to truly connect and be present with another human being. And for me, another really, really powerful one is being in nature or experiencing awe, looking at a sunset, a moonrise, the vastness of the night sky, or centuries-old trees in a forest. I wish you all the very best.
Thank you for your beautiful congratulations, and also for really highlighting, I suppose, that, it is hard to be a podcaster. It is hard to continue to be consistent, to find great guests, and to produce something of a high standard so regularly. So I'm going to give myself a pat on the back. And I thank you for your words of wisdom. And gosh, what I love about my guests is that there's just so much experience and expertise and knowledge, and they all have their own beautiful way of sharing it with you as a listener. And I've been on this amazing learning journey with you. And I really echo what you've said about us sitting with our anxiety. And it's no doubt been a thread that listeners who've been with the podcast for some time will be picking up on. And that's what I love about podcasting, is that you can have a little seed planted, and over time that seed is watered as that idea is reinforced by different people in very different ways. And this idea of recognizing our anxiety, being able to notice how it feels in our body and know that all of the sensations that we feel when we are anxious are there because our nervous system has gone into a state that is preparing us to fight a danger or to flee the danger, because our brain has detected a threat. To understand that whilst it feels uncomfortable, it is not dangerous. Of course, when we do have these feelings and we are in danger, we want to be able to act on that and fight or flee. However, that's not the kind of anxiety we're talking about here. And so, Helena, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for highlighting that. This idea that we can allow it to pass through us. When we recognize it, we notice it, we can name it, and we can just say to ourselves, I'm feeling anxious, and that's okay. What I will say to myself, and it doesn't matter if it's anxiety or if it's sadness or if it's just feeling low for any particular reason, or not feeling happy, just feeling kind of meh, or whatever it is I'm feeling, when I notice it, often that first instinct is, I want to feel better. But then I can just step back and zoom out as if I'm kind of up on the balcony looking down at me and my life and my experiences, and recognize that, hey, this is just how I feel. This is temporary. This will pass just like the weather. And it's okay just to feel like this. I know it's only going to be for a while. So, Helena, thank you. I know that you've recorded this in amongst travelling overseas to speak at a conference about dementia and returning to Australia and then packing up and getting ready to head over to do the Kokoda track. So very grateful to you for your wisdom, for your friendship, and for sharing that with us here today. The next guest who has something to share with us is the wonderful Paul Taylor. I have been a fan of Paul's work for a very long time, and I'm very lucky to obviously be connected with Paul and his wonderful wife, Carly Taylor, who you heard from earlier, because we live in the local area and Carly and I are friends. So Paul is super practical in what he shares, and I really love the way he summarises a practical and skillful approach to managing anxiety. Here's what Paul had to share with us.
Hey there, I'm Paul Taylor, and I just want to give you my take on anxiety. So I look at it from a neuroscience and a physiology perspective. And when viewed from that, what anxiety really is it's over-arousal. It is too much of arousal, these stress hormones. It's exactly the same hormones that we have when we're excited, but it's just too much. And what we can do about it is a process that I call discharge, recharge, reframe. So the discharge bit is about burning up some of those stress hormones to bring it down to an acceptable amount of arousal. That's a 30-second burst of vigorous exercise to maybe a minute or two. Then you recharge with some slow, controlled breathing, which brings your brain out of a stress state. And then you reframe by saying, okay, well, this is not a good situation, but what needs to be done?
Paul, thank you for giving us those insights from a neuroscience and physiology perspective. I love how practical it is and how you've really summarised it in a way that's really easy for people to remember. This idea that we can discharge, recharge and reframe. And your last question, okay, well, this is not good. It's not a good situation. What needs to be done? What action can we take? What can we do to move forward? Even though we might find ourselves in a difficult situation, we've dialed down our anxiety, we've settled it down, there might be some residual anxiety, but we need to move forward, and that really comes down to our values. So, Paul, thank you. And don't you just love Paul's accent? Awesome. Thanks again, Paul, for taking the time to share that with us. Our next and final guest sharing some thoughts with us is somebody who I was introduced to when I first was a guest on his podcast, and it may very well have even been my very first podcast interview, and I was so anxious. I felt quite terrified because he is a really experienced podcaster and I was very, very new to that medium. However, by the time we got chatting off air and then launched into the recording, I felt like we were old friends, and we have since recorded on his podcast, over 6, maybe 8 episodes together. And you may recall that he was a guest early in the piece for us here on Well Hello Anxiety. If you haven't guessed, I am speaking about the one and only Craig Harper, who has 2 podcasts himself, the You Project podcast and also Life with Craig Harper. And I neglected to mention that Paul Taylor has his own podcast, of course, and that is called The Paul Taylor Show. Craig and I have been friends for some years now, and I just adore him. He does incredible work, and I am so delighted to be able to share Craig's words with you. Craig was a huge cheerleader for me when I was first starting the podcast. In fact, I wondered if I might regret sharing with Craig this was something I wanted to do, and I did so publicly on his podcast. And then I think that was perhaps a way of me really holding myself accountable, because anxiety was really high for me. So Craig has shared some words with me to congratulate me on this milestone episode. Here's what he had to say.
Jodi, Craig Anthony Harper, congratulations on 100 episodes. How good are you? Amazing. Well, hello, anxiety. I love the name of your show. It's definitely the best name of a podcast in Australia. I love it. I love you. I love what you're doing. You're helping people. You're empowering people. You're supporting. You're educating. You're inspiring. You're a great woman doing great things. And I love our friendship. I love that we've been able to connect. I love that you've been able to come on my show and enlighten my audience. I appreciate your kindness, your empathy, your generosity, and keep doing awesome work, because we need you. We need more people like you. And again, congrats on 100 eps. Love and hugs, Harps.
Craig, thank you so much. Love and hugs right back at you. And thanks so much for your support and for really encouraging me to do this, because I absolutely love this beautiful medium of podcasting. I've learned so much. I've connected with so many incredible people, and I'm very, very grateful to have been supported from the very word go. And I love that you love the name of the podcast so much. I do too. Well, thank you. I could not have made it to 100 episodes without the support of you as a beautiful and connected listener to this podcast. I'm incredibly grateful to you for listening and tuning in and for sharing the podcast with the people that you know will benefit from it as much as you have yourself. So thank you to you for listening and for sharing this journey with me and for being patient with me at the beginning when my confidence was lower than it is now. My anxiety was much higher. So it's just a testament to the fact that the time will pass anyway, no matter what it is that we want to do. It's never too late. I am 49. I started a podcast 2 years ago and never would have dreamed that it would have taken me to the places that it has. So if you have something on your heart, in your head, that you would like to do, please make a start, however small. Tell someone who will be a cheerleader for you, who will support you and encourage you. And remember that no matter what journey we're on, it's never a straight line. My journey from where I began my professional career to where I am now is certainly not a straight line. It kind of started in a straight line, then feels like there's quite a scribble in the middle when I went in all different directions, doing a variety of things that I just loved, and all have paved the way to where I am and to where I'm going. So thank you again to you. I really love that on this podcast, I'm able to share this philosophy that anxiety is a part of life. Yes, it is something that can get in the way. It can feel incredibly uncomfortable, right through to what feels like intolerable. But when we understand it, we know how it feels for us. We can recognize when it's rising up for us. We know the kinds of symptoms that anxiety brings for us. We can learn what works for us to settle it back down. And once we dial it down, we settle ourselves and we settle our nervous system, we can all move forward. Anxiety might have to come with us, but it doesn't have to stand in the way of us doing what matters. I sincerely hope that this episode has brought you some joy and some insights, some incredible insights. A huge thank you to all of my guests who have shared their wisdom with us on this episode. Thank you again, and I will look forward to seeing you next week. Okay, bye.